Thank you all for joining us tonight. Our webinar tonight is talking about your contents or personal property. It's entitled Wrapping Up Your Personal Property Claim. For those of you who this is your first UP webinar on contents, bear in mind that this is aimed at an audience that is 2-3 years down the road and wrapping it up. So there's some information that's not going to be relevant. My apologies for the barking dogs. Let's start that again. I'm going to keep going. So tonight's webinar may not be applicable for you, or it may be a little bit confusing. So if you are Maui, for example, impacted by the Maui wildfires, we will be doing a webinar for contents on this coming up soon. The same with the 2024 California and Colorado. We'll be offering that again. So let me go ahead and get going. If you'd like to download and follow along, here is on our website where to find it under events. A little bit about United Policyholders. We're a national nonprofit that acts as an insurance resource and respected voice for insurance consumers in all 50 states. We've been in operation since 1991. And as we say, we're not for profit, not for sale. We're funded by donations and grants. And our tagline is, we've got your back when insurance matters. We have team up. So on our team tonight, our professional staff, myself, Annie Barber, Amy Ludwig. We have our government and nonprofit partners that we work with in long-term recovery groups in different spaces. And then our volunteers, our team up, professional catastrophic loss survivors who want to pay their knowledge forward. And then our consumer-focused professionals such as Chris Rocker, who is here with us today from Colorado. We have 3 programs: our Roadmap to Recovery, which is where we're providing that guidance on insurance and restoring your assets after a catastrophic loss. Roadmap to Preparedness is where we take those lessons learned to help communities and households reduce their risk and become more resilient and prepared if they did incur a loss. And Advocacy and Action is where we take those pain points and fight to improve insurance consumer rights and protections. If you do not have our little yellow disaster recovery handbook, please email. We'll provide it to you. It's a great resource, especially when you're looking at our website, which has literally thousands of pages of material, and it feels a little overwhelming. The book is a very curated set of information that's bite-sized. You can take it in bite-sized pieces. It's got a complete contents listing at the back with lots of information to help you with that. So please take advantage of that if you would like one. And then going back to our disaster libraries, if you go here on our website, you can find the specific disaster that we're working on, and that state-by-state resources to help with you. It's got links to our professional help directory, samples and examples, and our Survivors Speak series, which is, again, going back to our team up volunteers who share their information of how to do things and how they were able to get through the process. Fine print, this workshop is intended to be general guidance only. We are not providing legal advice. We don't endorse, warrant any of our sponsors, speakers at our workshops, and bear in mind our speakers are volunteering their time as educators. They are not acting in any capacity as professional help for you. Just need to make that clear. Today's presenters, myself, Annie Barber, program liaison. That's a new title, Annie. Chris Rockers with the claims group in Colorado. And thank you so much for joining us tonight, Chris. We greatly appreciate you tag teaming on this topic and getting our. So goal of today's presentation is just, again, to help you secure that full amount of the insurance company owes you for every personal property item that was damaged or destroyed up to your policy limits in the least time consuming and painless manner possible. And this is the strategy that we follow in every time we do this workshop. Just a few words of wisdom here that we'd like to share. Recovery is a marathon and not a sprint. And Annie, I would say that's very much true. The truisms, aphorisms that we follow. Yes, go ahead. I'm talking over you and I shouldn't be.
Nope, you're absolutely fine. Yeah, it is. And you need to give yourself grace and not let that survivor anxiety that's sitting in the middle of your chest force you any faster than you need to go.
Excuse me. And so guiding principles for this and just any part of your insurance claim, focusing on documenting that full extent and value of your losses, giving your adjuster the chance to do the right thing, but don't be a pushover. The key words to remember: leverage negotiation, polite assertiveness, and if you need help, get it. You don't need to go this
You know,
alone.
one of the things,
Go ahead, Chris.
one of the things that I would add there, Valerie, is oftentimes you're given the option to, and we believe that you should be preparing your own inventory. There are times where a carrier might assist you, but there is a difference in the inventory that you prepare and the inventory that a representative of the carrier might prepare for you. So take a bit of ownership. They can provide assistance, but at the end of the day, you want it to be your inventory versus something that perhaps was created by the carrier's adjuster. So in Servio, as an example of a contents company that provides assistance to a carrier, but don't be mistaken, in Servio, if they're brought on by the carrier, are trying to prepare the inventory to the carrier's guidelines and may not necessarily have your best interest in mind. So you have to be proactive in this process, as painful as and as time consuming as it may be. It's in your best interest to have a hand in the inventory that is being prepared.
Right, because it's the value, the loss that you've incurred, that documentation you're providing is what's going to get you to claim that value. And it's the same with the tools we provide. We provide samples and examples, but they are, they need to be customized and tailored and do the work to reflect what you have, right? Because the more you understand about your insurance benefits, your rights, the value of your losses, as Chris was saying, the more benefits you're going to be able to recover to rebuild your home and life, and the smoother, hopefully, your claim will go. And just the reminder, if you're treating this as a business transaction, it's personal, and that's really hard. Anything you want to add here? Because I know that's hard. It's just hard for people to have this perspective.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing are sentimental items that you have a lot of value of, and the insurance company does not, because they do not replacement value on sentimental items. But in the big picture of things, you really want to make sure that you are very clear on what they can depreciate, what they can't, what's an acceptable amount, which is what we'll cover as we go along here.
And the carriers are to the Division of Insurance and United Policyholders has been very instrumental in getting carriers to recognize that they are to simplify the process. Nonetheless, the more details that you can provide, the easier it is, or the more support can be provided to support your like kind and quality replacement cost pricing. That's why, again, it's very important to have a vested interest in this. You do, but details are very important. And while efforts should be made to try to simplify the process, at the end of the day, you're still responsible for submitting it as your claim. Therefore, you want to be as thorough and detailed as you can.
That hits that last bullet, that the adjusters vary in experience, right? They might tell you what you've given them is okay or not to worry about it, but you do have to do your homework here. So speaking up, present your request clearly and in writing, explain what you need, when you need it, why you're entitled to it, and document this, right? Keep that claims journal, who you talked to, what number you called, date, time, what was said, and keep a working copy of your policy. One of the best questions you can ask as you're going through any part of your claim is, can you show me where it says that in my policy? Because if it's not defined in your policy, it's their process, their procedure, it's not in that contract. And so there's room for negotiation there. Again, keeping up that paper trail. This is the guidance that we provide there. And I'm just going to talk really quickly here at a high level about how contents claims work. As I said, this is our focus for this is really about getting you finished, but we just want to recap the things that you need to know here. So you want to know your policy, your limits, details about your insurance company, how they operate. So as Chris was saying, some insurance companies I believe State Farm did or used to provide someone that would help you with the contents if you requested it. But that was, not necessarily it was not a product for you to wash your hands of. It was, here's a product that we're putting together for you to finish working from. You need to read your complete policy. You're just checking for anything that's going to increase the amount of that contents inventory amount, right? So you're looking for scheduled items. You're going to look for sublimits, what those limitations are. And again, being very organized. As you're buying things, save those receipts, scan them, keep track of everything you can. We highly recommend setting up an email for this specifically so that you can keep all those things in one place. And so going back to knowing your limits, with the exception of State Farm, it is coverage C in most insurance policies. State Farm is coverage B, but that is the amount you've got, right? So in this example here, personal property, $350,000. And let me keep going here. So knowing your limits. So you're starting with that deck page. You want to seek out any and all endorsements that may increase it and do your math, right? You want to know how much you're owed and then keep tracking on that. Again, checking the scheduled items, checking your limits. And then depending on your sublimits, they may be based on type of peril. So for example, theft. So here we go. For this one, firearms is limited to $2,500 if the loss is from a theft, not from a wildfire, not from a flood. Sorry, go back here. But look for these special limits of liability. One of the most
Therefore,
surprising.
your carrier shouldn't suggest on a wildfire claim that sublimit applies. I think that's
Exactly.
the important part of what you're saying, Valerie. So,
Right.
and some may, so they may be confused, but you need to make sure that you understand that you are not limited on a wildfire to a $2,500 sublimit for firearms, unless the loss was theft, and in wildfire it clearly isn't.
Right. And one of the things that surprises people is the limitation on money in the house, securities, all of that stuff. It's usually a very small amount. The same with business property. If it's covered very minimally. And so for those of us who work from home or have a home-based business, that's usually a shocking surprise to realize that property is not, you can't claim that, or you can only claim to policy limits. And these are items that are not usually covered. So subtenants, roommates, your pets, anything that has its own coverage, usually art, jewelry, things like that. Motor vehicles are generally not covered, recreational vehicles. And then this is just an example slide that walks you through what the flow is. So typically, depending on the state you're in, you should have gotten an advance. Both California and Colorado have an advance. But you get that advance, and then you'll submit your inventory, you'll get your actual cash value payments. And then once you start replacing items, unless you're able to get them to pay in full because you exceed, you get the replacement costs. And so this is an example of what that looks like in a policy.
Yep. If you could go back real quick, Val. So I think everyone is probably aware, because we're kind of wrapping this up, but the advance would be issued early on. So in a fire that happened in 2021, you should get that advance relatively early. The ACV payment is going to be issued after you have submitted your inventory. And that's going to be based on the inventory that was submitted. And then when you get the recoverable depreciation, which is the stage that you ought to be in now, is if the inventory hasn't been completed, you still may have an ACV payment coming. But once the inventory has been completed, and if you haven't received the full personal property limit on an ACV basis, you probably will be submitting receipts to capture some of the recoverable depreciation. But that's the stage that you ought to be in now. You should have received your advance and ACV payments.
And Chris, could you address, I hear from people all the time that the insurance adjuster wants them to do it on their spreadsheet and that they want the whole list at once. Could you clarify that for people?
You bet. So typically, we would say whatever's convenient for you, the homeowner, in preparing it. So if you want to and are comfortable entering information on the carrier's website, you're free to do that. We don't. We want to adhere to the guidelines of the policy, but there are a number of things in the worksheet that might be on a carrier's website that are not actually requested in the policy. So oftentimes, if we were assisting somebody, we would be preparing it with the homeowners themselves, but there is no requirement that you use the worksheet provided by the carrier, if that answers your question.
It does. And they can also send in partial lists to kind of keep track of
Absolutely.
where they
So,
are. Yeah.
right. So we have worked with homeowners who have been informed by the adjuster that they must submit a complete list. I would respectfully push back a bit on that. Having lost everything, it will take time for an inventory to be completed, and you should have ample time, and they should provide some kind of assistance. But you should not need to, and I don't believe you do need to complete it before you submit it and before they issue a payment. If you're doing it partially, that's still part of your claim, and that should be addressed, and a payment can be issued on that. There is no requirement. I believe it would be improper for the carrier to suggest that you must complete it before they will ever give any attention to your claim.
Thank you.
for clarifying that. So just to touch on these definitions as we're talking, replacement cost, the price to replace what it would actually cost to repair or replace it right now with a new item. Most homeowners policies, but not all, are replacement cost policies. So this process Chris outlined of, you submit your list, you get the ACV. This would apply as you're replacing items. However, if you did not have a replacement cost policy, you're looking at this actual cash value. So this is typically manufactured homes. Some other policies have this, and it is just that pre-loss value, what the price a willing buyer would have paid you as a willing seller immediately before the loss. And this is the formula that is determined by. So when we're talking, we'll talk about depreciation in just a bit. And then thank you, Chris, for bringing this up. That whole idea of requirements versus requests. Locate in your policy the language that states what your duties and responsibilities are. And then you can remember that working copy of your policy. Compare that to what the adjuster is asking you to provide. And if you don't believe it will assist your claim, ask them to show you where it is in your policy. If they're pushing back, reach out to your state Department of Insurance to understand if this is applicable. You want to be complying and provide everything you can to help move the claim along, but also if it's an undue burden and it's not providing a value, as Chris said, as long as it's not defined in your policy language, you should be able to, as long as you're moving it forward, whether it's a handwritten list, your own spreadsheet, you're using a UP spreadsheet, whatever it is, you get it done. Going to talk about depreciation very quickly. The loss in value of an item due to age and condition or wear and tear. These are some other terms you may see. It is negotiable, so be aware when you submit that list, it's going to come back and items that are allowed to be depreciated will be depreciated. And so just to be aware, the more depreciation your insurer applies, the less you're going to collect up front. There is no official standard, and everything that is submitted should not have a blanket 50% depreciation. It should reflect both age and condition in both states. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get there. And then one of the big things is just being aware of items that should not be depreciated. So antiques, fine art, jewelry, things like that. There's some things that will appreciate in value, musical instruments per se. And so being aware of those things.
And one of the things I think that's very important for homeowners to be aware of is the carrier will have, they're using a depreciation guideline. I think it's the Joint Military, it's the Joint Military Depreciation Guideline, but it's just a guide. And they assign a life expectancy to darn near everything. you as a homeowner would not necessarily know that they're relying on this as a guide, or what is depreciated at what percent on a yearly basis. Um, you're not informed of that until you have the loss, but there are a number of factors that must be considered. As Valerie is explaining in these slides, that it's not just the age and the condition, but it is the quality of the product that you have. It is the use of the product that you have. It can be the remaining useful life of that product. So depreciation is something that is not set in stone. And I think the carriers need to rely on the information that you guys provide to support a less amount. They should not be providing excessive depreciation on once you get your inventory back, because as the slides show, that if they take excessive depreciation, the payment that you get on an ACV basis is going to be considerably less than what you perhaps anticipated or what is supported. And that's why you need to voice concerns if you get something back from the carrier that you believe is questionable.
Thank you
And
for that.
Chris, could you touch base on, if you're doing an inventory of your clothes and you have 5 shirts that you just got in the last couple months, can you label those as new? Can you label other ones
Yes.
as, 6 months old, a year old?
Yep, I think that out of convenience, and you would want to be upfront with the carrier, but I think that when you submit an inventory, you can say in your, and again, to me, it's not age, it's approximate age. And oftentimes in their column, it'll say age, but again, this is a very difficult process for homeowners to go through. We typically suggest that that column is an approximate age. But if something is under 6 months, we would consider that new, or very, very little depreciation is to be taken on that. And if in your communication or your transmittal to the carrier, you suggest, hey, everything that is 6 months or less is designated as new with no depreciation, put that in your email, convey that, because you want to be open and upfront with them. And so they understand what it is that you captured, or why it is that you captured 6 months as new. But I think that you're certainly entitled to share that type of information as part of your claim.
So I'll give you a great example of that. So I have a friend who lost her home in the 2003 Cedar fire. Husband's a doctor. They have their annual holiday party. She went to Nordstrom's every year for 25 years, bought that glitzy, beautiful dress, wore it one time because her sizes would fluctuate. She had 25 years of like new gowns in there. And Auto Club, her company, was trying to depreciate them. And her argument was, I might have worn them twice. I've worn all of them once. Because
Yep.
it's one of those situations, you can't wear the same dress the next year's holiday party. And then if you can't fit into it, you're not wearing it, but you're going to save it because you might fit into it later.
And their wear and tear argument then would be difficult to support, because if you've worn it once and it's still 25 years, there's very little wear and tear to that dress, especially if it's hung in a closet and it's covered, and it's well maintained and cared for. There should still be very limited depreciation in my mind on that item and that dress.
And it's the difference here, right? Yeah, family with no children, 5-year-old sofa. It might have been 80% depreciated with the normal kids and pets like I have in my house. My grandmother's house, it is pristine like new. You lift that little plastic cover and nobody's ever touched it. So as we were talking about being aware of excessive depreciation and looking at negotiating that on a case-by-case basis to reflect the condition of those items, even if you're grouping them together. I'm a book hoarder, I will admit it. I hoard my books. I like to buy hardbacks. They are in impeccable condition because I buy them and I read them once or twice and they never leave my shelves. And then I put in new shelves. So my books are like new. You should not depreciate them based on the age of them. And
But
so here's
to
some
segue
examples.
into that, Valerie, very
Mhm.
importantly, books are an example of an item based upon the depreciation guide that the carriers use, that it is blanket 50% depreciation, whether the book is 1 year old or
Right,
20 years old, whether the book is paperback or hardback, unless it's a textbook. And again, I think you can make the argument. Some people have a library of collectible books and of various sorts. They should not be depreciated 50%. And you need to make that argument. But that's what the
excellent.
guide tells them to do, and they do it.
Right. And then, so again, you have to negotiate. And then this is a slide that talks about how to resolve that dispute, right? So case by case. If they've done the fixed percentages, like the example Chris mentioned with the books, that 50%, I would be arguing very hard that it is not, that is not the case for that book, because when I replace it, you're going to pay the same amount that I did for when I bought it the original time. Backing up whatever documentation you have, your best arguments to support your position, going up the chain of command if you need to, if your adjuster is not working with you or understanding your points, going up to the manager, the supervisor, if you need to go to your Department of Insurance to move it forward, or looking at mediation, litigation. Yes. And this is just an example of that negotiation, right? So looking at the textbook example, it's you've lost the age is here. As Chris said, that's not going to be depreciated because those are honestly just they're technical business tools more so than literature, right? And so they're treated appropriately. But looking at
I'm sorry, Val. So if you're looking at your slide right now and you're looking at this example from Liberty Mutual, what's
yes,
somewhat telling is this is a an example of what you might get from a carrier, but what is noticeably absent is the approximate age. So you'll see the quantity, you'll see the price, you'll see the estimate amount, you'll see the tax, and then you see the depreciation. But you're saying, well, what is my depreciation percentage? It's on this example, it's like 37.5% for the shirts on the top entry. But without the age, you wouldn't know that could be excessive. I just don't know what the age of the possessions are, and it's not in this column or the printout that they give you. You would want to know that. They should base the estimate that they're giving to you based on your submittal, and the age should be reflected to me on that, so you know, so you can double check.
thank you. All right, deep breath. Finishing off your list. So we're going again, we're focused on that you're at the end of the process. You're filling in the gaps. You've been submitting and reviewing the depreciated inventories list that you've received. And you're going through and just making sure it's as accurate as you can, right? So one of the things that happens, quite honestly, for years, even after you've submitted your inventory, is you're always going to be remembering things you forgot you had. And so as you're remembering them, add them to your list. On our site, there's some samples and examples here that just walk you through things to jog your memory, right? Going to a shop, a store is kind of dangerous, because then you realize, oh, I had this, and this, I forgot this. Visiting family and friends, you realize, oh, we went to Niagara Falls together. We both had this. How did I forget this fabulous mug, piece of art, whatever it was that you had? And so, A, being kind to yourself, but B, going ahead and adding them in. It's not realistic to expect you can just off the top of your brain remember everything you had in the house and pull up that documentation. Not even looking at trauma and everything else you've gone through. It's just impossible. If I asked anyone what you have in your desk drawer at work, very few of you are going to be able to give me that line by line item recitation of what you have in there. It's not going to happen, except for very few folks. Let me say that. Most of us cannot do that. And so,
quite frankly, my fire was 7 years ago. I still remember stuff that I'd forgotten. And it's become, kind of a joke between my guy and I. Oh, I used to have one of those. But that's that's how long you'll remember these things.
And as you go through your list, and if you have submitted an inventory and this is going to be a supplement, it may be easiest to do it like on a room by room basis. So you can double check to make sure that you're not adding something that you probably or may have included on a previous one. But if it's room by room, you're able to kind of reconcile and double check to make sure you're not duplicating. But they're truly new things that were not previously captured.
So is there, if you remember something after the 2-year window, you can't add it, correct? That's a question in the chat.
I believe you can. And I think that if your communications with the carrier are such that You've given the inventory as best you can, but say that as you recall additional things, you're able to supplement them, especially if this is a total loss claim. And even if it's not, if you're communicating with your carrier or your adjuster, hey, I just recalled this, would you please add this to my list? I certainly believe it's proper for them to acknowledge or at least recognize that and respond without suggesting that the claim is closed. I don't believe that would be proper.
Thank you.
And that communication piece is key, and the same for replacing items, you know, and that's the reality, depending on how your build, your rebuild or your replacement of your home is going. It might be that you're needing to stretch out the replacement of items because you don't have a place to store them. And so again, that's communicating with your carrier to ask for an extension on that replacement piece if you need to, if you're going to exceed the time that's allowed by your contract and your state law. Reminder again to protect yourself, never intentionally claim items you did not have, especially if you're borrowing a friend's, a neighbor's, a UP memory jogger spreadsheet. Make sure it reflects what you had. Now, having said that, if you've made an innocent mistake, they're very common. Again, your memory is as good as it is. All of this is guesswork unless you had an inventory prepared pre-disaster. So that does not amount to insurance fraud, but intentional misrepresentation is a felony. I will go here because this is one of the areas that I think we tend to fall down in creating an inventory, refining quantities of things you had. So books are a prime example. How many books can you put on a 2-foot bookcase, right? 2-foot shelf. It's much more than you think, especially with the way some of us double stack or stack on top. So organize a friend's bookcase, do the measurement there. Go to the bookstore. Barnes and Noble will let you play. You just have to put it back the way you found it. So, you know, checking that and just be aware that, you know, your quantities are always going to be under what you most likely had. The average American man has 50 shirts. I asked one of our employees whose husband is a firefighter, and her guess was he had 12. She counted, he was very close to that 50 average. But because you don't see them in that many, because we wear our favorites, we don't look at what we all have in the closet. 82% of the clothes were unworn or worn once and put away, right? So just, you know, being aware of that. And the same with craft supplies, tools, things like that. You put a lot of stuff in a small space without realizing it. So, you know, be aware of that. You know, it's not just the adding to the list, but you might have to, you know, when you have that brainwave of, you know, I put in a bookcase. I had 3 bookcases. Wait, I'm missing all of these things, especially when you're able to look at photos from the house that friends and family have provided. And then the big thing, pricing matters. Use the pricing that reflects the quality of the items you had. So the example we have in Servio is, as Chris was mentioning earlier, one of our Colorado survivors shared their list that they had submitted with the Waterford Crystal Bowl. And what they got back from Servio was a Pyrex Walmart bowl. Pricing differential of several $100s. So making sure that what you submitted is what's reflecting and what you get back from the insurance company.
And to that point, Valerie, so what's very important is, again, details, because if you have, and you're able to group certain things, but if you have 10 pair of jeans versus 10 pair of Jordache jeans, it's like, kind, and quality, so the details matter. And when you're putting your inventory together, even though it may be a bit more difficult and time consuming, we oftentimes will include a link that supports the pricing that we included. Oftentimes the carriers, to the UP slides point, carriers will use sale prices, and that's just not proper. That sale ended probably 5 months before they even turned that inventory into you. So you shouldn't use sale pricing, and the carrier shouldn't use sale pricing. Carrier representatives should not use sale pricing. But if you have the time, include a link that verifies the replacement cost that you believe is supportive of the possession that you lost. Carriers often will include a link, check them and verify. But again, this should be your inventory, not necessarily the carrier's. So to this very point, you don't want to be paid for a Pyrex bowl when it's truly a Waterford crystal, and Waterford crystal is not depreciated at all. So it's much higher cost to replace, should not be depreciated at all.
And also bear in mind that it doesn't matter if you got something from a garage sale. It doesn't matter what you paid for it. It's the value of it. So just be very clear about that.
It's the cost to replace it new today. Even if you bought it at a garage sale, what does it cost to buy that like kind of quality today? So you're absolutely right.
Well, even if it was given to you, it's in your home, you're having
Absolutely.
said yes. And so, but again, it needs to belong to you. Pricing valuable collections, if you've had items that fall into that bucket, just being really careful with the pricing. These are the characteristics of value that get called out. You can, if you had something, looking at qualified appraisers, there are a few websites that can provide stuff, but a lot of that is just going to take, it's just working to get that information. So if you had antiques, it might be talking to an antique dealer, just to be aware of those pieces, especially. You want to make sure that that pricing reflects what you feel it would cost to replace what you had. So if you had that custom made Amish dining room table from 25 years ago that your family chipped in and bought you drove it across country, what would it cost to get that same table made for you, handmade for you today out of walnut, right? And Chris, what's the phrase that you use, like, kind, and quality?
That's correct. So your example of the Waterford is the key example, right? You just can't say a glass bowl if it was truly a Waterford crystal. So carrier would price it as a bowl versus the detail that you provided. And it is like kind and quality. So you don't want to embellish, but you certainly don't want to suggest that the carrier change your description and or the value of what it is that you lost. So that's why the details are very important.
Thank you for that. And so this is a quote from one of our, actually from one of our Colorado survivors. So if that is supported contents loss exceeds the full replacement limit, when you total up your actual cash value inventory, replace it be settled, resolved without the need to replace or submit receipts. If you've well exceeded that, make that request. It will save you the effort of tracking all of those pieces. Having said that, though, if you have a disaster casualty loss or a lawsuit against, a third party, you will probably need those receipts to document that piece. So just stating that, you have your proof, keep your proof, but you mightn't be able to stop that, short circuit that piece of the claims process. It's worth the ask. So next steps after, and we alluded to this earlier, trust but verify their valuations, fight back if you feel that you've been unfairly depreciated, negotiate depreciation to reflect the condition, age, what was the other phrase you used, Chris?
Age, condition, use, remaining useful life. There are a number of factors. It's just not.
That's it.
It's just not the age. Yep.
Got it. Thank you. Negotiating via that paper trail, again, stating your case cleanly, clearly, precisely, concisely. This is personal leverage you can bring into those conversations, that other survivors have used to their benefit, going up the chain of command till the disputed issue is resolved.
Let me go back to the last one just real quick. So
Yeah.
we did have somebody in my fire who not only lost her home, but her mother lost her home. And as she was trying to make both of these lists, and her mother had dementia, She finally called her mother's insurance and said, I cannot navigate this. Well, because of a disability act, they were able to send out an adjuster who sat with her mom for 2 hours and gave her all of her contents money. So just know that there are ways around things if you have a disability, and you want to utilize them.
And to that point too, Annie, I think that that's valid. So if you're kind of stuck and you're not making progress, understand that I think when you submit your inventory to the carrier or the adjuster, that adjuster is not likely going to review it. They're going to send it to somebody in a different state. Your adjuster may be in a different state. They may be with a different company. They'll price it and the like. But if you come to a point where you're not making progress, refer to the fact that you are in Colorado and you want to meet somebody locally who is familiar with your claim to go over anything and everything. There's nothing that you haven't shared or you wouldn't want to share with them, but you believe that you have the right, and I believe you have the right, to request a local meeting with somebody here to simplify and try to assist and resolve the claim versus numerous phone calls with somebody out of state that really isn't familiar with your contents. You guys know your contents better than anybody. What me, UP, the adjuster, anybody. Share that and use that to your advantage. But I think that it's helpful to request a meeting here rather than lengthy phone calls and long distance calls.
And that's a great point, Chris, because one of the biggest problems in the claims process is that delay. You know, you make a phone call, it takes 2 weeks to get back to you. They ask you a question, you can't resolve it. And if you had somebody in front of you, you could knock a lot of that out. It's a great point.
Right. I think that's for if you have a considerable difference. If you're talking just a few items, it probably can be addressed on a call. But if there's significant differences at this stage of your claim, it warrants a meeting, I believe.
That's good. And then going up the chain of command if you need to.
So Chris, I have a quick question. A lot of people that I dealt with in the park fire were telling me that their adjusters were telling them that they needed to show their receipts. Could you address that, please?
I'm sorry, show their what?
Their receipts for their items that were lost.
To verify that they owned it or to get the replacement cost?
No, to verify, this was right after the fire, to verify that they owned.
So, yep, I believe that is not proper. So to the extent that you have something, you can certainly share it. But I think it's incredibly burdensome and somewhat oppressive to request receipts for every bloody thing that you had to verify you owned it. You can press them if they want to take a recorded statement of you or an EUO or something, if they're going to question what it is that's submitted. And while you certainly want to cooperate, I don't believe it's proper for them to ask for receipts for everything. If there are certain high-end items and you want to verify that, you can. If you have photos or something that support that it clearly existed, give that to them instead. But I don't believe it's proper to ask for a receipt for everything. That's certainly not supported.
Thank you.
But now receipts for capturing that replacement cost, that's a valid request. And so saving those, scanning them, yeah.
To the extent that you have not received your full limits on an ACV basis, if you need to capture recoverable depreciation, they are going to ask for the receipts. And not only are they going to ask for the receipts, they're going to ask you to do a line item comparison for every entry on that receipt. What is the entry number on the inventory? So they can determine what that payment is going to be.
Got it. Now going with what you just said there, Chris, to the extent that you have not captured it with that ACV payment. So one of the tips is tracking your payments. So this is an example. We had a CPA who lost his home in the Woolsey fire, who created the spreadsheet for us just to track the drawdown, right? So here, see personal property, each payment you receive, noting what it is so that you might have that advance. You submit your list, you have your ACV payments that's made. Just pretend you did it all in one. And then as you submit receipts, you're submitting until you get fully paid to policy limits.
So Chris, in the chat, Someone asks, a high-end Mason and Hamlin piano, should that be depreciated?
No. So it'd be, again, it depends if it is considered a collectible, if it is a high-end piece, I would say no. If it is a piano, pianos are used and depreciated, and that would be proper. If this is a collectible item, then there should be no depreciation on it. A Steinway is an example.
Thank
And then being strategic. So like you said, Chris, you don't want to have to submit every receipt that you make. So being strategic, what you're purchasing so that you can maximize. So you're arguing for low depreciation and maximize your ACV. And then as you're replacing items, focusing on those more expensive items first.
The
So
high ticket items.
yes, the high ticket. So your furniture, things like that are going to get you there so you can stop this very painful process.
And there are times too, if you have a reasonable adjuster or carrier, that you can group things. You can say, okay, I lost $50,000 in clothing. Allow me to provide receipts of $50,000 in clothing without saying this is for a t-shirt, this is for pants, this is for a suit, this is for a belt.
Right.
And we've been successful in suggesting that that is a reasonable way to recover depreciation. Not all carriers will agree, but you are able to buy certain things and group them by categories. Furniture is an example. There are a number of different categories that would kind of fall into that, but suggest that to your carrier. And again, many people try to do a lot by phone. We believe it's best to document your communications in writing. So make sure that you track those communications with the carrier and the requests that you're making.
All right, thank you. And just focus on what's best for you and your family. I have a friend from the '03 fire who literally 10 years after his fire still finds something on his list, add to his list, send it to his carrier. His case was closed. It was just he felt like it was an I told you so, because he told them that he was underinsured on contents and they told him there was no way. And so he was proving a point. Other people settle for less, knowing they're leaving money on the table because it is just either too painful or too much work. Because it is, just to be frank, it is a full-time job on top of that, in your normal job, and you're trying to recover. So what works for you, no judgment, you do what you need to do. And then big thing, knowing your rights. So is there a time limit to collect RC benefits, replacement cost benefits in Colorado? Yes, Colorado's 365 days after the expiration of ALE. Chris, if they get an extension on their ALE, that should flow with that 365 days, right?
I would certainly make that assertion. That is correct.
Yeah. California, it's 36 months from the first date towards your actual cash value. This slide deck is available to you on our site, so you have these for reference. We just want to touch a bit of the rights. As for the Marshall Fire, your advance was 30%. Chris, it has changed now, right?
Yeah.
So for the newer
That is
fire,
correct. 65% for fires that are declared as a disaster by the governor. The carriers are required to issue 65% advance of your personal property limit.
right. And that's a big thanks to the 2020 East Troublesome Fire survivors and the Marshall Fire survivors for getting that defined in state law. That is an amazing win. Let's keep going here. I'm trying to think what else fits with this last one is very fun. I don't think this is humanly possible to not exceed the 10th grade level with these legal contracts, but hopefully it does follow that. And then just being aware that Xactimate is not the last word. The same with Inservio software. If they're using any software, just because they're using the software does not make it correct.
Agreed.
All right, and let's get going through here. This is just a recap. Depreciation, as Chris said, it's not just wear and tear. It's all facts and circumstances which lead to that correct estimate of the value of the item. California, these are the regulations for this. Again, it's condition and age and what is that useful life of the property. These are the California Fair Claims Settlement Practice Acts. A lot of information here. One right you have in California is how they calculated depreciation and your settlement offer. So if it's not clear, you can ask. This code allows that information to be shared with you. If you have any questions, you can visit our website for anything here. I'm going to run through these really quick, quit sharing my screen, and then we'll take any more questions there are. The Colorado Department Division of Insurance, sorry, DORA. This is their how to contact them. If you need assistance, please let them know. I will say after the Marshall Fire, they did a really good job of putting out timely bulletins, trying to get ahead of things to help people. And so, any issues you have, please share with them because they have been very responsive in trying to tackle those issues. California Department of Insurance is here, the same. They have the request for assistance on their site. You can call, you can go online, you can print a form and mail it in. For information about staying in touch with us, here's the contact information. We have our Survivor to Survivor forums coming up the third Tuesday of the month. We just had it 2 days ago, Annie. For August, we'll have it in September. You can register here. If you are with one of the more recent fires, that workshop, the Survivor to Survivor Forum, will be coming up in September. We don't have that date yet, but it'll be on our website. And that will be a monthly because it's a little more raw for people. So we want to have a safer space for that for everyone. Our upcoming Roadmap to Recovery events, so posted here on our website. You can also go here to see recordings of past events, related resources. We have our Ask an Expert forum. Please take advantage of it. It's free. We pull in experts like Chris and others from across the country to be able to provide answers to your questions. It saves people from doing that really deep dive till 3 in the morning on our website, trying to find the answer. If you can't find it quickly, you can go to bed knowing you put the question in. And then quickly want to thank our funders, RCRC, Golden State Finance Authority, and the Community Foundation of Boulder County. And I'm going to quit sharing my screen. And then Annie, do we have any other questions in the Q&A?
We do. Is it a good practice to send an estimate quotes for large ticket items, such as a hot tub, to ensure the adjuster is ready to pay and agrees to the amount?
I believe it is. If the hot tub is captured as personal property, and oftentimes it is, yeah, and if that's like, kind, and quality, then absolutely, that supports what you're claiming, and that should be, the carrier should be able to verify it. So I would strongly suggest that it be provided.
So the question off of that would be, when does it not get clarified as personal property and maybe it goes under other structures?
It could, because they may say it's a utility that's affixed to your property by a utility line, like the water line or something. But I truly believe it's going to be personal property, and the carrier should be working with you. It depends. If it's a total loss and you're underinsured under every category, then it doesn't matter where you capture it. If you have funds available on an ACV basis under your personal property, then capture it under personal property.
Thank you, Chris. That was the point I was just going to ask you to elaborate on. Yeah, is the thinking about window treatments and things like that could be viewed as part of the structure, but could also be under. And so, if it's not clear with what your adjuster is saying, how do you navigate that? Is it what you said? You're looking at the dollars to see where you've got space, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I believe that, again, you can have the conversation with your adjuster, but then put your position in writing. You need to be a bit familiar with your policy, but again, they should be trying to protect you, not kind of resist. So if it's reasonable, send them an email, put it in writing, and suggest why they think that you need them to consider capturing it under wherever the available coverage is.
So I have a question that goes through my mind a lot. How do you depreciate a shovel? I mean, how do they figure, there are certain garden tools, a metal rake, that doesn't really seem like it gets wear and tear. I mean, if you're not using it all the time.
So fair question. And again, it's going to be dependent, but if they look at the depreciation guideline, they're going to say tools like that are depreciated at 12% per year. You don't need to buy again. So it's, how often is your shovel used? Does the shovel get wear and tear? I think it absolutely does. Is it appropriate to apply depreciation? I believe it is. But if you use it once or twice a year over a span of 20 years, it still has a remaining useful life, right? It's still as good as it was the day you bought it, unless you somehow cracked it or there was damage to it. But I think you can argue for a less amount of depreciation if you don't believe what the carrier's captured is proper.
Thank you. Another question, is there a timeline for submitting contents versus closing out contents for non-total loss claim? So smoke damage. We have been in a stalemate with Allstate because of their offer to our initial contents claim.
So I want to make sure I understand. So they submitted their a non-salvageable inventory, is that correct? And
Yes,
they're looking to resolve the non-salvage a payment on a non-salvageable inventory, not the salvageable. Is that correct?
right. Right, and they want to know if there's a different time frame for that.
There should not be. So the time frame is still, you submit your inventory. If the inventory has been submitted, they've issued probably, well, on a partial loss, they probably wouldn't have even given you an advance other than 5,000. But you should have received an ACV payment, and you're still in the home, so your ALE. I don't know if you're giving ALE. I mean, sometimes the condition of the home is such that you're still out of a house, even on a partial loss. So there's certain things that I'm not quite sure I'm aware of if they're getting ALE, but if they're in the home, they were going to, this may be an example where they have 365 days from the ACV payment to capture recoverable depreciation. So this is a bit different than a total loss claim.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to give her just a moment to make sure she doesn't have a fault. She says we were out for 8 months, but are now back in home.
Okay. So they should have received an ACV payment. They're trying to get their recoverable depreciation. They should have, I think, 365 days to capture that from the time that they move back into their home.
Thank you. So shall we do a last call for questions?
I was gonna say last call for questions. Thank you all for hanging out with us, and thank you, Chris, for your time. And anyone with a question, please go ahead and pop it in the Q&A.
Here we go. Actual cash value payment is in dispute. This is the same woman. Very low. Thank you. So she should keep up the good fight.
Absolutely. So without having seen the inventory or what's in dispute, if they believe what they've captured, and hopefully they would have captured the replacement cost, not allowed the carrier to suggest what it is. The carrier, they should have been providing an approximate age that would reflect an appropriate ACV payment. And in any event, communications with the carrier or the adjuster should continue until you're made whole. If, again, you're unsuccessful, as Valerie and Annie have suggested here, then take the matter to the Division of Insurance, because they want to understand what insurance carriers are doing that is somewhat problematic. You should not need to do that, and the Division of Insurance has probably limited authority to request or demand that a carrier do something. But if a carrier is not acting appropriately, then after efforts on your part, then take it to the division and let them see if they can help you.
Okay. Same gal, we paid third party to compile lists with pictures and description, very thorough. Next question, what happens, the separate person, what happens if the adjuster did supply the replacement cost and now as you're replacing, you find a large difference?
Then raise it. I mean, you certainly have the right to continue the communications with the carrier to make sure that you are whole. And obligation is still yours as the homeowner to support your claim, but the carrier must consider the information that you guys provide. If the other example where they had a third party content specialist prepare that to me is supported, or at least it should be. That is the basis upon which, again, request the bloody meeting with the carrier or the adjuster if they're questioning things. Because you shouldn't have a significant back and forth if what they're suggesting is not supported. If yours, what you're suggesting is and theirs is not, then you request the meeting.
Thank you. Is it appropriate for an insurance company to require a receipt for things that cost over $1,000 or appraisal?
Many carriers do request that. And again, if it's one thing to request a receipt to verify that you actually owned it, and if you don't have the receipt, that does not mean you didn't own it. So if you have it provided, if you don't say, I don't have it, but tell me how it is that you might suggest or question what it is that I've captured. So if you're being honest and accurate and you had it, then again, press them on it. If it is for the replacement of something, that you're certainly you're gonna submit the receipt for replacement, but they can't ask you, you can only provide what you have.
Exactly.
Thank you. That is the last of our questions. And I appreciate you allowing us to pick your brain, Chris. I
Happy to do
learn
it.
something all the time from everybody.
All right. Well, thank you all for
Very good.
joining us. Chris, thank you for your time. Let you get to your dinner, and best of luck to all of you, and have a good evening.
Yeah, take
Thanks
care.
much. Take care.
Thanks, Amy.